In Climate Watch, there's a push on Capitol Hill to hold nations accountable for illegal deforestation. The United States is one of the largest importers of agriculture commodities like cocoa, raw rubber, and palm oil. But these products and others have a steep cost on the environment. They typically come from tropical forests and are sourced on illegally deforested land. The World Resources Institute found between 2001 and 2015, those products accounted for 26% of global tree cover loss. That amounts to an area of land more than twice the size of Montana. Now, one Democratic senator plans to introduce a new bill that he hopes will change this. Joining us now to talk more about it is CBS climate and energy reporter Cara Korte. Cara, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. So, can you tell us a little bit more about the consumer and agricultural role in deforestation and how we can better untangle their impact on forests? And I ask you this because last night my husband and I were talking about this story, and we talked about the fact that palm oil is in almost every processed food that you go to the supermarket to buy. And we both sort of looked at each other and said, we had no idea, what is palm oil? So I think a lot of American consumers are not aware of the role they play in deforestation.
You're right on, Tanya. As I worked on this story, I was having that same conversation with anyone I was talking to. When it comes to palm oil, it's not just in food, by the way. It's in soap. It's in makeup. It keeps things on the shelves longer. It enhances shelf life. So that's why when you walk into a grocery store, basically half of the products in there contain palm oil or some type of palm oil derivative. And when it comes to deforestation, it is a rampant problem. You noted those figures about how often it occurs, and what makes that even more troubling, Tanya, is that a lot of deforestation occurs illegally, whether it's beef. Beef and cattle is the actually driving cause of deforestation across the globe. That's happening mostly in the Amazon. Ranchers come in illegally to raise cattle to be sold for its beef. But also in the United States, we're a big importer of leather hides from Amazonian and Latin American countries. Those hides can be found in leather in most of your cars in the United States. But you also mentioned cocoa from West Africa. The United States is the number one importer there. We're the number one importer of raw rubber and tires from Southeast Asia. And then, of course, as you said, palm oil is so popular. So the trouble is, I spoke to one global commodities expert who told me that in places like Brazil, it's just a free-for-all. Ranchers, miners, and loggers come into these areas. They deforest the land, whether to use the trees or the natural resources there or to raise cattle. And it's basically a no-holds-barred commodities race all across the world that no one is really doing anything to stop at this moment.
And so now Democratic Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii wants to introduce a bill that would help regulate the importing of some of these items that are typically linked to illegal deforestation. So can you break down for us what that bill does? Because I'm assuming that there's such a supply chain here, it gets hard, as you said, to keep track of where everything is coming from exactly, right? So you've got maybe an illegal supplier all the way at the end of the supply chain. The manufacturer in the U.S. who's buying it 3 steps down doesn't know where it came from, right?
Exactly. And it's a quandary, Tanya, because the issue itself of illegal deforestation is very straightforward, very easy to understand. But you're talking about these global trade markets that are very complex and go from very small areas to very big areas, and it's hard to track. So that's what Senator Brian Schatz from Hawaii wants to do. I spoke to him about this bill that he's getting ready to introduce. And the whole aim of the bill is to increase transparency, because right now, as consumers and as American companies, it's very hard to figure out where exactly these raw materials, like the leather, like the rubber, where they originate from. So one of the things the bill is going to establish, if passed, is an advisory committee that will keep track of sourcing and processing of these materials and require international companies that the United States is trading with to do the same. It will, in fact, make it illegal for United States companies to trade these illegal commodities. And so that's one big way the bill hopes to enforce these illegal deforestation laws that, of course, exist in other countries. Schatz is trying to incentivize American consumers and American companies to not partake in this illegal trade. And one way he's going to incentivize it is literally through federal purchasing of products. And he's going to have a procurement preference, is how it's worded in the bill, for any kind of federal purchasing to come from responsibly sourced material. So when you think about President Biden saying that he wants to make electric vehicles all, federal for his federal fleet of cars to make all electric vehicles. When you think about, well, where are the tires coming from for those cars? This bill would make it so that those tires have to be sourced responsibly.
Well, it sounds like a great start. I mean, I can also imagine there must be chemists somewhere trying to work on a replacement for palm oil, right? Because part of the problem is that it's used in everything. And now that I know that it's used in everything that I go to the store to buy, how can a consumer like me be informed about the origin of the products they're buying at the grocery store?
Well, something interesting to keep in mind, Tanya, is actually environmental organizations have written about this, that it seems intuitive, but actually boycotting palm oil, they say, is not the answer. You can look for certain products that have responsibly sourced labels on them, particularly when it comes to palm oil. But the thing is there's a belief amongst these environmental groups that if you say, I'm just boycotting that company, the company will then start to rely on palm oil alternatives. And it turns out that palm oil is actually a pretty sustainable product as far as other oils go compared to something like soybean oil. So it's just that the problem is way out of hand right now. The problem is not the fact that we use palm oil, it's that we're using so much of it and that we're getting it in an illegal way. So obviously people can look up, like I said, you can basically, anything that doesn't come from the ground in a grocery store is going to have palm oil in it. But there are also companies that are trying to do voluntarily commit to better sourcing practices. But experts I spoke to said this is why this bill is so important, because we really need the market leverage to mandate all of these companies to get in line and respect these illegal deforestation laws.
Yeah. It has to be on a much higher level than just the individual consumer. All right. Well, Cara Korte, thank you so much for telling us so much about a very important topic that I think a lot of people were not very aware of. So thank you for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tanya.